Hello everyone, welcome back to Ace Wisdom. Let's make something very clear. They didn't walk away because they were done. They walked away because they expected you to fall apart without them. They thought your world would collapse quietly, while theirs got louder with distractions, rebounds and pretend healing. But what they didn't expect is that you'd evolve, that you'd detach, not with drama, not with tears, but with clarity. That you'd become calm, and that calm, it's the kind of silence that screams. Because when your energy shifts, so do they. This isn't some random breakup story. This is psychological warfare. Welcome to week 3, where their mind games fail and yours begin. And today's episode? Top 4 reasons your avoidant ex still can't let go, but won't admit it. Volume 4, Episode 19 is about pulling the curtain back on what's really going on in their head, even while they act like nothing ever touched them. Before we go deeper, real quick, a huge thank you to everyone who's been tuning in and showing love through Volume 4 so far, especially on Episode 18 yesterday. This community, we don't chase closure, we create clarity. If you haven't already, make sure you're subscribed and turn on notifications, because this volume is only getting deeper, darker and more unfiltered. And what's coming next? Let's just say your ex won't be ready. Now, let's confront the ugly truth. Most avoidants don't move on, they escape. They vanish into the arms of someone who feels safer, someone who doesn't trigger their fear of intimacy. And when they do, they convince themselves you were the problem, you were too emotional, you wanted too much. But guess what? Those aren't conclusions, those are coping mechanisms, because the moment you stopped chasing, the moment you stopped explaining yourself, stopped trying to be understood by someone who refused to understand you, that's the moment you became dangerous. Psychology tells us avoidants often come from emotionally neglectful environments. They learned early on that closeness, pain, vulnerability, risk, and detachment, survival. So when someone comes into their life with real connection, with presence, with intensity, their instinct is to run, not because you were too much, but because it triggered wounds they never addressed. So they ghost, they distance, they start playing these bizarre emotional chess moves, while pretending they've healed in a span of 3 days and a new situationship. But make no mistake, they feel more than they admit. You don't just disappear from someone's life after bonding on a soul level and feel nothing. That's a fantasy they tell themselves to avoid accountability. And that's why they can't let go. Because even if they left, even if they blocked you, even if they're with someone new, they're still trying to make sense of why they can't stop checking your page at 2 a.m. Why they still replay those memories when they're lying next to someone who doesn't get them the way you did. And no, they won't admit this. Not to you, not to their friends. Sometimes not even to themselves. Because to admit they miss you is to admit they messed up. And avoidance? They'd rather rewrite the past than confront the truth. Marcus Aurelius once said, "The opinion of 10,000 men is of no value if none of them know anything about the subject." Your ex doesn't know themselves. They know defense. They know distance. They know denial. But deep self-awareness, emotional maturity, owning their baggage, that's a war they haven't even begun to fight. And you were the mirror they hated, because you reflected everything they didn't want to see, their inconsistency, their emotional unavailability, their inability to hold space for something real. That's why they can't let go, not because they're still in love, but because your energy now represents the one thing they couldn't conquer. You didn't fold, you didn't blow up their phone, you didn't beg for another round of heartbreak. You went silent, and silence, when used with intention, is power incarnate. Science backs it up. Studies show that emotional distance after an anxious avoidant relationship causes higher cognitive dissonance in the avoidant than in the anxious partner. Because their fantasy of control gets disrupted, They want you to miss them, but they don't want to feel like they need you. They want to keep you in emotional limbo, but they don't want to admit you still live in their head rent-free. So what do? They stalk your stories. They replay old texts. They compare everyone new to you, even if they won't say it out loud. And if they're not doing that now, they will, because you're not replaceable, and deep down, they know it. This video is going to unpack 4 psychological truths about why your avoidant ex is still energetically attached to you, even if they swear they're over it. So don't just watch this like a breakup video. Watch this like an emotional playbook, because once you understand why they can't let go, you stop asking, "What's wrong with me?" and start realizing, damn, they just couldn't handle what was right. Before we dive into key point 1, I want everyone watching to comment this below. I don't chase, I outgrow. Say it out loud, type it below, let it echo, because this isn't just a mantra, it's a mindset. And if you've made it this far, you're not here to be someone's emotional safety net. You're here to become your highest version. Drop the mantra, hit like, share this with someone still stuck in confusion. Subscribe, turn on notifications, and join the channel membership to support the movement. Now let's get into the truth they won't say out loud, but feel every damn day. Let's begin. Stay focused. Reason 1. You gave them a type of connection they can't recreate, no matter who they date next. Let's rip this open. They didn't walk away because the connection wasn't strong enough. They walked away because it was too strong, and now they're stuck trying to recreate it with people who don't even speak the same emotional language. And spoiler alert, it's not working. See, here's what most people don't understand about avoidance. They're not numb. They're not heartless. They're just emotionally underdeveloped. And when someone like you enters their life, someone with presence, with depth, with intent, it rattles every defense mechanism they've built since childhood. You weren't just nice. You weren't just loyal. You were emotionally available in a way they never learned how to be. And that scared them more than being alone ever could. Because when someone shows up with real love, love that requires them to show up, to self-reflect, to risk being seen, that's when the alarm bells in their nervous system start ringing. So what do? They sabotage it. They push you away. They ghost you, blame you, pick fights, or claim they need space. Not because you're wrong for them, but because you're right in a way they can't handle. And after they walk away, they tell themselves a pretty little lie. I just need someone less intense. Translation: I need someone I can control. Someone who doesn't call out their inconsistencies. Someone who won't mirror their wounds back to them. But let's get brutally honest here. Avoidants don't want peace. They want control disguised as peace. And when they try to move on, they chase safe people, emotionally flat, non-confrontational, low-stakes replacements. But after the dust settles, after the sex wears off and the novelty dies, they're left with this strange, unsettling thought. Why does it still feel empty? Because that new person doesn't challenge them, doesn't excite them, doesn't see them the way you did. And that's when it hits them. You weren't just another person. You were a mirror. And mirrors are dangerous when someone's been hiding from their reflection for years. You triggered growth. You created emotional friction. You disrupted the system they used to survive, but now that same system is suffocating them. Here's the psychological trap they're in. The avoidant ex who's emotionally unhealed wants 2 things at the same time: deep connection, total control. But those 2 things can't coexist, because intimacy demands vulnerability, and control demands distance. So when they lose you, someone who was emotionally real, raw, and present, they don't just miss you. They miss the version of themselves they only felt safe showing around you. Let that sink in. Because most people think avoidance just move on and forget. But what's actually happening is this. They're haunted. Haunted by your emotional presence. Haunted by the conversations they'll never have with their new partner. Haunted by how safe they felt with you, even when they were acting out. You gave them a type of intimacy they now know exists, but they can't recreate it with anyone else, because they didn't build it. You did. You brought the emotional maturity. You held space when they shut down. You were consistent when they were unpredictable, and now they're realizing they weren't just loved, they were understood, and nothing compares to being understood, but they'll never say that out loud, not to their friends, not to their rebound, not even to themselves. Instead, they'll pretend they're at peace. They'll throw shade on your name. They'll act like they outgrew you, when really they ran from the very thing they still crave at night. And here's where it gets dark. Some avoidants will keep chasing empty connections for years, trying to find someone who gives them the emotional safety you once did, without demanding they grow up in the process. But it never works, because deep connection is not something you stumble into, it's something you have to show up for. And they left the very classroom that was teaching them how to do that. So here they are now, watching your silence, feeling your absence, and realizing you weren't too much. You were just too real for the version of themselves they were still pretending to be. And no matter how many people they date, how many fake smiles they wear, or how far they try to emotionally detach, they can't let go, because what you gave them wasn't surface level, it was soul level, and the worst part, they know they won't find that again. Reason 2. Their ego is still invested in how you see them. Even after they left. Let's call it what it is. They didn't just want to leave, they wanted to win. And when an avoidant ex walks away, it's rarely about freedom. It's about narrative control. They want to be the one who ended it, the one who stayed calm, the one who didn't need the other person. But the second you stop reaching out, the second you stop reacting, stop defending, stop trying to be understood, that's when their carefully crafted story starts to crumble. Because in their mind, your silence isn't just absence, it's a threat to their image. Their ego starts whispering, wait, what are they thinking about me now? Do they see me as cold? Do they think I'm replaceable? See, avoidants aren't wired for clean goodbyes. They need to feel superior to cope with the shame they're running from. They want to walk away and still live in your head rent-free, still haunt your thoughts, still be the one who got away. But what they don't want is for you to glow up, to move on without bitterness, to look happier, calmer, more grounded without them. Because that's not just a bruise to the ego, it's a full-blown identity crisis. Psychologists call this narcissistic injury. It's what happens when someone who depends on external validation suddenly realizes they don't control how others see them anymore. Avoidance might not show it, but trust me, they care deeply about your perception of them. Even if they blocked you, even if they're happily dating someone else, even if they haven't said a word in weeks. Behind all that silence is one loud question. What version of me are they holding in their mind? And if that version doesn't match the one they wanted you to believe, if they sense that you see them as emotionally immature, inconsistent, avoidant, or fake, that eats them alive. Because now they've lost more than just your presence. They've lost the illusion of being in control of the story. Avoidants are narrative builders. They leave you and start constructing a version of events that makes them feel better about it. I had to leave. They were too emotional. They didn't make me feel safe. But the second you go quiet, something unexpected happens. Their story collapses in on itself. Because now, they don't know what you think. And that uncertainty, it destroys them. Why? Because they don't just want closure. They want validation. They want you to secretly admire them, to miss them, to long for them even after they hurt you. They want to feel like the most important chapter in your book, even if they left before the ending. But when you detach with dignity, when you don't stalk, don't reach out, don't retaliate or post cryptic quotes begging to be seen, you rob them of the one thing their ego needs to survive, relevance. And now they're stuck in limbo. They don't want to be with you, because being with you means facing themselves. But they also don't want you to be fine without them, because that shatters the story they told themselves to sleep at night. So they stay watching, lurking, over-analyzing your peace like it's a threat. They see your calm, your self-control, your lack of interest, and their inner narrative starts to glitch. They begin to ask, did I actually matter to them? Did I make a mistake? Were they stronger than I realized? And the answer is yes, you were, and they know it. But they'll never admit that. Instead, they'll quietly obsess. They'll hover around your energy field like a ghost who can't rest. And no, this doesn't mean they're going to call. Avoidants don't chase closure. They stalk it emotionally, silently, internally. From behind fake smiles and curated photos, they're still trying to read you. Because their ego can't handle the idea that you no longer idealize them, that you no longer hold them on a pedestal, that you saw through the mask and still walked away with grace. They expected a meltdown. They got a masterclass in emotional self-respect. And now they're left scrambling for something they never truly owned: your admiration. You see, when an avoidant ex realizes they can't control the narrative anymore, that you've rewritten the story without them as the hero, they can't let go. Not because of love, but because of ego. And ego never forgets when it's been dethroned. Reason 3. They're still competing with the image of who you're becoming without them. You want the truth? They're not obsessing over the old version of you, the one they pushed away, minimized, misunderstood. They're obsessing over the new version you're becoming, the version that doesn't text back, the version that doesn't explain their silence, the version they don't recognize anymore, and that terrifies them. See, when an avoidant leaves, they think they've hit the emotional jackpot. They believe they've exited a connection with no real loss. They expect you to fall apart, or at best, plateau emotionally without them. But the moment they start to see growth, that's when things shift. When your energy no longer orbits theirs, when your self-worth no longer depends on their validation, when your glow-up is no longer about proving anything but about elevating from within. They don't just miss the past, they start competing with your future. Let that sink in. They thought you'd always be there emotionally, lingering, waiting, watching. They imagined you stuck in the same place, heartbroken, over-analyzing, unsure if you'll ever find better. But instead, you became unreadable. You stopped leaking your feelings all over the timeline. You stopped reacting. You stopped performing for their attention. And the version of you they once dismissed, that version evolved in silence. According to psychological research, when people experience rejection followed by personal growth, it triggers what's called comparison anxiety in the rejecter, and avoidants are no exception. In fact, they're more vulnerable to it, because they define emotional safety through control. And when your growth removes their control, they spiral silently. So what do? They watch you, not out of love, but out of envy. They watch your calm, they watch your confidence, they watch your success, your glow-up, your social energy shift. And each new post you make, each new sign that you've outgrown them, it hits like a threat to their emotional identity, because in their mind, you weren't supposed to win without them. You were supposed to stay small. You were supposed to question yourself forever. But now Now you're stepping into a version of yourself that exposes how little they actually brought to the table, and they can't stand that. Let's be real. They're not proud of how they handled the breakup. They didn't leave with maturity. They didn't communicate clearly. They didn't honor the connection. So when they see you thriving, that's not inspiring, that's threatening, because you represent something they never mastered: emotional maturity. You felt deeply. You showed up. You tried. You grew. They ran, deflected, denied. So now they're left comparing their current emotional self, still stuck in denial, still hiding behind avoidant tactics, to the version of you who's leveled up with grace. And whether they admit it or not, there's a quiet war playing out in their head. Did I make the wrong call? Was I the one who couldn't keep up? What if they really were the best thing I'll never get back? This isn't just regret, it's identity collapse. Because now your progress redefines the story. You were never too much, you were ahead, and your growth becomes a mirror, one they desperately try to avoid looking into, because every time they see you elevating, it reminds them of how they stayed stagnant. It reminds them that maybe, just maybe, they didn't outgrow you. They were simply outclassed by someone who kept evolving when they stayed the same. Here's what they won't admit. They wish they could reach out. They fantasize about a casual check-in just to test your temperature. They wonder if they could slide back into your life and still be relevant. But their pride, their fear of vulnerability, it keeps them frozen. So instead of reconnecting, they obsess, they compare, they compete with your image in silence. And that's exactly why they can't let go. Because while you were healing, they were performing. While you were detaching, they were pretending. While you were becoming, they were stalling. So now, they're not haunted by memories. They're haunted by your momentum. Because your growth doesn't just remind them of what they lost. It reminds them of what they refused to become. Reason 4. They never got the closure. They thought they would, and now your silence feels like rejection. Let's get into the part they'll never say out loud. They didn't just want to leave. They wanted to leave and still be the hero in your story. They wanted to walk out without consequence, emotionally, socially, spiritually. They wanted to disappear while keeping your admiration intact. But the part they didn't prepare for? Your silence. Because here's what most avoidants truly crave deep down. Even if they never say it, they want the upper hand in the goodbye. They want to feel like they ended things before you could, like they stayed one emotional step ahead, like they escaped something before it got too real. But when you don't chase, when you don't beg, don't plead, don't write some poetic final message for closure, that entire fantasy collapses. See, most avoidants are used to being chased after they pull away. They're used to having the final word. They're used to seeing their ex stuck in limbo, overanalyzing, waiting for them to come back and clarify things. So, when you go dead silent, not out of manipulation, but from pure emotional clarity, that silence starts to echo inside of them like a rejection they weren't built to handle. Because for once, it's them who's left wondering. What are they thinking? Do they hate me? Why haven't they reached out? Were they faking their feelings the whole time? And even though they were the one who disconnected, their nervous system doesn't understand logic. It understands energy shifts. And yours is completely gone. That's what makes your silence so loud. Because it's not the kind that screams, "I'm angry." It's the kind that whispers, "I'm done." And that is what breaks them. Because no matter how much they pretend they've moved on, they were banking on a future where they could revisit this, where they could test the waters just in case they ever missed you enough to come back, where you'd still have some door, even if just slightly, left open. But now, They sense that door is shut, locked, and maybe even bolted for good, and that unsettles them more than they'll ever admit, because now they're forced to sit with the very thing they thought they'd avoid, uncertainty, and for someone who left you because they couldn't sit with their own emotions. Sitting with yours, especially when unspoken, is unbearable. Modern psychology calls this the unfinished narrative loop. When someone doesn't get the emotional closure they assumed would be there, their mind obsesses over it, filling in blanks, replaying memories, constructing stories, just to feel something that gives it resolution. And your avoidant ex is stuck in that loop, not because you're punishing them, but because they thought they could leave without consequence. They thought detachment would protect them. But now they're haunted by questions they can't answer. They thought they were in control, but now you are. Because now they want a reaction, and they're not getting one. Now they want to be seen, and you've gone invisible. Now they want to know how you feel, and you've moved from expression to evolution. And that's what they'll carry quietly, for weeks, months, maybe years. It's not always the loss of love that keeps them stuck. It's the loss of control over your emotions that drives them insane. They didn't expect your silence to feel like a door slamming shut. But now that it has, they're the one searching for meaning. They're the one looking for signs. They're the one wondering if they'll ever matter again, in your mind, in your heart, in your life. And no, they may never say it. Avoidants don't speak in vulnerability. They speak in detachment, sarcasm, distraction. But behind the performance, they're feeling what they thought they'd never have to: powerlessness. You were supposed to need them. You were supposed to react. You were supposed to hurt visibly. But instead, you healed quietly. You loved yourself louder. You turned their exit into your elevation. And now, they can't let go. Not because they want another chance, but because they never got the ending they wanted. They never got the emotional security blanket of being remembered a certain way. They never got to rewrite the story in their favor. And your silence? That silence is the only answer they're getting, and it's one they'll replay over and over in the echo chamber of their own mind. If you've made it to this point in the video, you already know what time it is. Drop this secret mantra in the comments. My silence is sacred. The first person to comment that mantra will get pinned below, because that one sentence, that's your power, that's your protection, that's your peace. Type it, claim it, hit like. Share this with someone stuck in confusion. And if you're serious about mastering emotional self-respect, subscribe and turn on notifications right now. And for those of you who want to support deeper content like this, join the channel membership. Link is in the description. Your ex didn't get closure, but you got something far better: clarity, peace, and a path forward they'll never be part of.